and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and it's been a couple weeks since we did this. Jim and I have been traveling, Will's been traveling, all the traveling has been happening, but we're back for this week, off next week because of travel and stuff going on, and then we'll be back probably for a while after that. So at least until we hit the holidays and things get a little crazy. But anyway, welcome to episode 486 of the Movie Bears podcast. This week we are reviewing A Haunting in Venice, the newest Agatha Christie adaptation from Kenneth Brannaugh, starring Kenneth Branagh, doing all the Kenneth Branagh things. We're excited to talk about this with you, but before we jump into that discussion, let me introduce you to my wonderful co-host. Jim Pugliafico is with us here on the show as usual. Hey babe, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. We're back doing the show again, and that's good. Like I said, it seems like much longer, but I think it's been like 2 weeks, maybe three. I don't
Stu?
even know. Two, but it seems like much longer. I mean, Brad, you and I were talking last night when we went to see this movie we're going to talk about today, like how long it had actually been since we had been in a movie theater. Because we didn't go in a movie theater the whole vacation and the lead up to the vacation. The last time we were in a movie theater was before the last review we did, which was Old Boy,
Yep.
at the Loft, which was like
Just at the end of
almost a month
August.
ago. Almost a month
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, it's crazy. So it was good to
Yeah.
get back to the movies. It's good to get back with you guys and talking about movies. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I agree. So good to be back in the office chair doing our thing. Glad you can be with us, babe. Also, very glad that William Melendez can be here with us as well. Will, I know we're losing you to Fantastic Fest next week, which is fine because Jim's going to be out on work travel anyway. But Will, I'm really excited for you. I know Simon is there with you. How jazzed are you, friend, for your Fantastic Fest to begin?
Incredibly jazzed. We are on this show. We just, I don't know, for some reason happen to be like movie fans. And part of that is we've between South by Southwest, Fantastic Fest, and other festivals we've attended, we've proven ourselves to be festival gluttons in our day, right? So I'm excited for it. Yeah. For those who've listened in the past, Simon, who is our friend from Australia, sometimes he chimes in with a question here or there, or his husband, Ben, who will sometimes you'll hear him show up in the comments. Or if you listen to a few of our local Fantastic Fest coverage episodes from previous years, you might recognize Simon's name. He just came in to visit today. Will be with me for the next week. I'm jazzed. I'm going to be watching like 36 fantastic genre movies this next week. What can I complain about?
Yeah, all of them. Are they all at the Alamo Lamar? Will?
Every single one of them at the newly renovated Alamo Draft
I heard
House,
about
South
that.
Lamar. Yeah, I mean, they finished the renovations like last week, I think. I don't even know what the lobby looks like.
It'll be interesting to hear what you think of it because I've heard varying things online about the lobby changes.
Yeah, well, I'll have a full report back for you soon.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to hearing all about that for sure. Always some good films coming out of Fantastic Fest, and it's a great festival. We love to, throw some support their way. So if you're in the Austin, Texas area, or you're going to be traveling down that way, definitely, if you get an opportunity, check out some films. But speaking of checking out some films, we recently got a chance to check out a film. As Jim mentioned, it was our first time back in the movie theater for Jim and myself in a few weeks. So it was kind of weird to like be back in a movie theater, ordering concessions and sitting down. I think we were one of like 4 people in our big theater. But I mean, it was a Monday night, not exactly a big night for people going to the movies, but maybe it was a good way to kind of dip our toes, back into the water a little bit. And it's going to be an interesting discussion. I think I'm looking forward to. Jim, I know we didn't really talk at all about much regarding how we felt about the movie beyond just a little bit of surfacey stuff. And
No.
I saw Scott's review, but I did not see your review at all on Letterboxd, so it's a complete anathema to me at this point. So, how do you gents feel about jumping into our movie discussion?
I'm excited to unmask this mystery and see how all three of us felt about this one.
Mhm.
There
Let's
you
get in
go.
our gondola and figure this, our 3-bear gondola, and figure out how this movie is.
Now that is a gondola ride I would take
Yeah.
for sure.
Then nice.
All right. Well, for those who are unfamiliar with our format, we like to talk about movies spoiler free for about 10 minutes or so. We'll give you our initial thoughts and impressions if we think this is worth seeing or checking out. Of course, at the end of the day, it's always up to you to make that decision for yourself, but we're happy to share a little bit about what we think if that's somehow helpful to you. And then we'll give you a fair warning before we take things into spoiler territory. And by fair warning, I mean I'll awkwardly ramble for 30 seconds to give you an opportunity to hit pause, walk away, come back for plugs at the end of the show. You're not going to want to miss those. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, a few days after we record, you'll have the ability to skip around using the time index that Jim lovingly puts together for you. But all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of A Haunting in Venice. All right, Jim, I know you've kind of been a fan of these Agatha Christie adaptations by Kenneth Branagh. We had Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile a couple years back. Very curious to hear what you felt about this film, but also give us a little bit of setup, if you don't mind, for folks who may be new to these adaptations or they're just not sure what this one's about. How does this one clock?
Yeah, so this is, as you mentioned, this is the third adaptation of an Agatha Christie mystery novel by director Kenneth Branagh. He directs this. It 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 is the, let me see, we got the previous one, Death on the Nile, just last year. We reviewed, and then the first one was like in 2017 or something like that. So there was a bit of a gap there. And I got to be honest, I'm really kind of digging these movies. I walked away. Well, first of all, I will let me set this movie up. It, like I said, it's based on Agatha Christie novel. This one is, however, the novel. This is the difference from this movie versus the other two is the novel was not called A Haunting in Venice. It was called Halloween Party. And I will say right up front that I have never read a single Agatha Christie novel. So I can't review, it's hard for me to review the movie versus the novel because I don't really know the novel. So I'm just going to basically give my impression of the movie. But I will do the quick synopsis here in my best or worst Hercule Poirot accent. Are you ready?
Oh no! Please don't offend other folks. I think your normal voice will be just fine.
Okay. In post-World War II Venice, Poirot, now retired and living in his own exile, reluctantly attends a seance. But when one of the guests is murdered, it is up to the former detective to once again uncover the killer. So that's the quick synopsis of the film. Yeah, I walked away from this one thinking, I really love these movies, and yes, the stories, the nature of these mysteries seems a little formulaic, maybe at this point, but I'm not blaming the movie for that. I think there's a little bit of comfort in that formula, because you're getting familiar with the main character, Hercule Poirot, and then all the other cast of characters that come in. I walked away from this saying, this is why I go to the movies, because I want to see something. I say it's different. It's certainly not different from the other Kenneth Branagh, Agatha Christie movies very much, although it is in a lot of regards. But it feels like the movie's trying to do something different, and it feels in a way, it feels fresh to me. Like there's some fantastic cinematography done here. The whole set and all the practical effects and things really like make the movie come to life. I compare this. This is a spooky movie, kind of not really a haunted house movie, but there's a séance. It's kind of like built around a séance, and there's a lot of spooky, mysterious things going on. Yet I and all the things they did in this movie felt way more spooky and scary than something we just reviewed a little while ago called Disney's A Haunted House. I just enjoyed this that much more. There was just more style put into this, less of the CGI BS. I love the character of Poirot. You got to root for him to do what he does, which is basically solve mysteries in his own way. The cast here is wonderful. We have Michelle Yeoh is in this, right? Shows up in this. She's amazing here, like she is in everything. Tina Fey shows up in like a leading role that's not really, I wouldn't call it, certainly not a comedic role. It's a dramatic role. There may be some moments or lines of comedy, but that's not why she's in here. Of course, Kenneth Branagh is Hercule Poirot. Jamie Dornan shows up in this, and I've increasingly over the years become more and more of a fan of Jamie Dornan and what he's able to do. A lot of great stuff in here. I really like this movie. I think it's solid. I think it's going to be interesting to see if any movie this Halloween season beats this one out for me for the spookiest, most atmospheric movie of the season. We'll see.
All right. Well, kind of crazy to think that we're getting into the Halloween season already. But I mean, all the decorations are up at Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart. And is Kmart still a thing? I don't even know, but I'm sure they're up there too, if it is. But yes, definitely some cool Halloween theming with this one, Jim. I'm curious, Will, did that hit as well for you with this film? Is it getting you into spooky season, heading into Fantastic Fest, genre film festival? How did this one hit?
So this one hit very well, but for a different reason. Less the spooky elements. We'll talk about those here in a moment. And honestly, more, and I just need to throw my bias down on the table. I am an absolute like slut for murder mysteries. So like this is my jam coming into it. This is like, I'm an easy mark for these. I think that like, honestly, if I had an infinite amount of money, I would have two trucks, one going to Rian Johnson's house, one going to Kenneth Branagh's house, so that they could make one of these movies go back and forth
every other year.
Every year. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. Right. I really enjoyed this one. Based on that same criteria, I love a good murder mystery. I think this one hits all of those things in, some new areas and also some familiar areas. And I don't know if that's necessarily a knock. These are adaptations of stories that are 50, 60 years old, right? So one of the things that I think about when I think about this, when I think of Death on the Nile, when I think of And Then There Were None, kind of like one of her big books, of course, Murder on the Orient. A lot of the things that we see as kind of tropey in murder mysteries came from these stories as opposed to these stories coming from those tropey areas. So that's one of the things where it's like, yeah, there's some things in here like that you've seen a billion times, but you've seen them all because they were done so incredibly well in these original Agatha Christie stories. Going into this one, I had not read nor seen, I don't think Halloween Party's been adapted before. So I didn't know what was going on in this one. Some parts of it you can kind of solve, some of them you can't, whatever, I never judge a movie like this if its quality isn't based on how well I figure it out. It's how much fun I have in the process of figuring it out, right? I do like the element of this one in the spooky side of things, where compared to some of these other Poirot movies and stories, this one plays a little bit more with some, I don't know, maybe it was a ghost style themes, right? And in a world where that doesn't seem like a compelling option, because that's just not part of what this character does normally, this story does a pretty good job of making it possible. So I really enjoyed this one. Is it the best spooky movie I'm going to see this year? Probably not. You know, I think it's great if it is for you, Jim, because I do think this one's kind of right up your alley for that. Is this going to be like the best acted movie I've seen of the year? No, although I enjoyed all of the acting in this. This is a solid ground rule double for me. You know, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would recommend it to other murder mystery fans. I don't know that this would necessarily convert people to the genre. But that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to play to the crowd, and that's what this one does, and I'm that crowd.
All right. Well, excellent, Will. Sounds like this one was a big feather in your cap, so to speak. Glad to hear that you enjoyed it as much as you did. I enjoyed this one as well, although I think maybe less so than either of you did, but that's okay. I really liked Murder on the Orient Express. I did read that book, and I felt like that was a pretty good adaptation. Death on the Nile, I thought was really good too. But this one, I don't know. It kind of left me wanting a little bit. Part of the problem, pulling from my Letterboxd review, is I had a lot of trouble with the dialogue in this movie. There's a lot of different accents. You know, people are from different regions. And a lot of the dialogue is just mumbled or even said into like a closed, like hand over the mouth when someone's scared or they're whispering, or so I couldn't even necessarily read lips to try and help me understand. And, you know, watching a movie at home, it's no problem because I can just turn on the subtitles and it's fine. But here I really couldn't do that. So I kept turning to Jim and I'm like, what did Poirot just say? What did the doctor just say? Michelle Yeoh was like the only one that I could really fully understand what the fuck they were saying. And that's pretty great because Michelle Yeoh, I think, was fantastic here. She did a wonderful job. But I don't know. Maybe I'll need to see this again, you know, when it's released for streaming on some platform where I can watch it with the subtitles on. And I might get a little more out of it. But I think as a whole, the movie is fine. It's kind of a paint by the numbers, run-of-the-mill murder mystery. The supernatural question mark elements are kind of interesting to play with. But at the end of the day, I didn't really felt like this brought anything new to the murder mystery genre. I mean, this could have been a toned down Knives Out movie. This could have been an old Pink Panther movie. This could have been any other murder mystery movie that has ever existed. But I do love Kenneth Branagh. Kenneth Branagh has also, been a favorite actor of mine for years and years and years. And I love seeing that he's still getting great, meaty projects like this. I know he's really helped to kind of shepherd these things out. And, even if you're putting yourself in your own movies that you're directing and helping to write, if that's the way you got to make sure you're still getting work, you really got to be your own advocate, especially this day and age with everything that's going on. Make sure you get your fair due. I did want to call out a couple performances, though, that I really appreciated from a couple of actors who are not necessarily big, huge name actors like Kenneth Branagh or Michelle Yeoh. Jim, you mentioned Jamie Dornan, and absolutely, we've seen him in a few things, including 50 Shades, but we've seen him in some good things as well. So great to see him show up here. But a couple people I want to call out. Kelly Riley from fucking Yellowstone, guys, who plays Beth on that show. The chain smoking, constantly drinking, like
trash potty mouth
lady. She's like this, like prim, proper, lovely British lady.
She's like a starlet in this. That's her thing.
Yeah, she is. And I, at first I was like, because I had seen the trailer once, I think, but maybe I had forgotten that she was in this, but I was like, oh shit, Beth is in this. Here we go. And I'm like, she's going to play the same character probably. Like she's going to be similar. But in like a minute, I completely forgot about her being Beth in Yellowstone. I mean, she did it. She made that leap. And so I think she did fantastically well. And then Camille Cotton, who played Olga. Never heard of her before. I don't know that I've seen her in anything else. But she had me just glued to the screen every time she came out and was, she was a little bit of an exposition machine. kind of giving us some of the backstory on like the curse and the house and things that happened. But I think they had some clever ways of kind of weaving her into what was going on, getting that exposition out. But man, the things she can do with like a single facial reaction just held for like a split second longer than you might normally hold them, I think was pretty great. So that was really good. And then I just want to give some props to Tina Fey, who have kind of gotten to the point I can't with Tina Fey. She's the same in like everything I see her in. But I actually liked her in this. I was like, am I enjoying a Tina Fey performance right now? I guess I am. So Tina Fey,
So take it.
good job playing something a little bit different. There was a little comedy there, but not crazy over the top. So for me, overall, the movie's kind of middling, but I mean, I appreciated it. I was entertained. I'm glad that I saw it. And you might be too, especially heading into Halloween season. It was really neat to see a Halloween party playing out in the watery canals of Venice and those old canal, bordering houses. I thought was really cool.
Could you imagine what it would have been like if you were a kid in Venice and you got invited to like a party in like the Palazzo? And I mean, that to me, that was like one of the most exciting scenes or sequences in the movie, right? That whole Halloween party, because it was very chaotic in scenes. It's like it was sort of tense. There was an undercurrent of tension. Of course, it's a murder mystery, so you're wondering, okay, who's going to get killed? When's something going to happen? And the movie is playing with that by giving you these weird camera angles and audio design and stuff. I thought it was really, really well done and a really great setup. And this is all before kind of the plot, capital PLOT, starts to take over. But I thought that whole setup of the Halloween party was really, really good.
I did too. There's something about these movies that only works when they're in a confined space with a confined cast, right? Because your murder mystery loses a little bit of something when people can just like go about their days, because you lose immediacy, or when there's so many characters you can't keep track of who's coming and going. And I wasn't sure what to expect, because this one is based inside of like a city, whereas the last one's like, oh, it's on a train, it's on a boat. So I'm like, oh, what's this one going to do? But because of some storms and some isolation, it did make it to where we had exactly that perfect element. We've got a short period of time to solve a mystery with a solid, small cast where everyone has their own sort of like, what's going on with this person? Their own little mini mysteries within the big mystery. All of that was exactly what I want out of a murder mystery. And it helped, like, we've mentioned all of these different cast members, and I think you could just go down the line and say, like, every single one of the people that was sort of in that final, in the mystery itself, I think every single one of them ended up doing exactly what they needed to do to pull this off. I felt like I had a good vibe on who everyone was, what they were doing, what their motivations were, what the interplay between the characters was, and with a cast of, I think there were like 9 or 10 different major people kind of circling around this house at any given time. No one kind of got lost in the cracks for me, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing.
Yeah, that can definitely be hard to do with a cavalcade cast like this, right? A mix of big names, but some small names too, and you kind of worry that the smaller characters are kind of gonna fade into the background and maybe not have a lot to do. This movie definitely brings everybody in, not to the same level, of course, but like, it wasn't one of those things where like someone shows up at the end of the movie and they're like, that person did it. And you're like, wait, who was that person again? I don't remember them at all. They're all pretty pervasive throughout the film. So I definitely give it credit there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Will, we've kind of talked about these movies, and you brought up Rian Johnson, and Brad even brought up the Knives Out, and of course the latest Glass Onion, which I think kind of take this premise. They kind of lean on this premise, but those movies I think tend to inject a lot more like razor edge, over the top, side to it, right? Where it's kind of like if you compared it to like a meal, like eating out, Glass Onion would be like eating out at a Nouveau, nouveau cuisine kind of place where they're trying to dazzle you with all this stuff. And this is the meat and potatoes at the diner that you go back to because it's comfort food. And it's when it's well done, it's amazing. And I think both of them have their place and can satisfy us as a meal. But it's interesting to see that like compare and contrast. So I think your idea, Will, of like one every other year would be great.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, I looked at Kenneth Brannaugh's IMDb. I said, okay, I want to see what he's doing next. When's the next one he's coming out? But it's not. There's nothing listed there, and I don't know if that's because of actor strike, issues or whatnot, or just there's just nothing in planning. But I haven't exactly scoured the internet, but these movies kind of make me hope for the next one.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where both of these types of stories, whether the nouveau or the classic, they inform each other, right? You are able to learn more about what the genre is at its core by seeing sort of the adaptation and tweak on it that Rian Johnson does, and through seeing those and the kind of the links that he'll take it, you can also see what that core element is when you loop back around. So both of them are stronger for it, and I would also very much recommend. Of course, now I've got to remember the name of it. There is a Poker Face.
Oh yeah,
with Natasha Lyonne is. Another one of those like really, really good, like murder mystery style, only this one's a television series on Peacock, I think. One of those.
Yeah.
I could gobble these up. So and the hard part is like I'm trying to talk about how much I enjoyed this, but also I'm having to avoid the mystery of it. So that's why I'm sort of talking around the themes of it. But
I've been not wanting to cut anybody off, but I've been thinking the last couple minutes might be a good opportunity to take us into spoiler territory here if y'all are ready.
I think so.
Cool. And I see a thumbs up from Jim.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, then we're going to go ahead and kick off spoilers for A Haunting in Venice. If you haven't seen this movie yet and you don't want to be spoiled on the plot, this is your chance. If you're listening live, step away for the next 20 minutes and 14 seconds. Coming back for plugs at the end. Set a timer on your watch, your phone, whatever works for you. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, etc., go ahead and use the time index in the show notes. Scrub forward, skip ahead with those shortcut links, and rejoin us for plugs. Otherwise, we're assuming that you're here because you want to be here. So I'm going to click the button to put our little spoiler ticker at the bottom of the screen, just so folks know. There it is. Spoilers, they are happening. Where y'all want to start?
I would like to start and talk about like the way this story is set up. I don't know if the book was like this, but this movie starts kind of centered around a seance where Hercule Poirot is brought in to kind of basically, what's the word I'm looking for? To debunk the medium, who is Michelle Yeoh, Mrs. Reynolds, right? Who's conducting the seance. Not necessarily he's not brought in to solve a murder up front, because the seance revolves around the death of a young girl who, is widely believed she committed suicide. But then there's also this question: did she fall or was she pushed? Blah blah blah. So it's kind of a big open question. So you're like, okay, what is this, the murder that he's solving? And then sure enough, another murder happens right about a third of the way through the movie that really kind of kicks things off. And yes, we are going to say the identity of the murderer in this story. Who wants to give it up?
It was Poirot the whole time.
No, it's not.
No, It was not Ross Perot.
It is the grieving mother. What's her name? Rowena Drake. Who is who's Alicia Drake, the dead girl's mother. Rowena, played by Kelly Riley. Who we talked about earlier. But yeah, she ends up being the murderer. I try not, it's impossible to try it's impossible to not start asking yourself, like, okay, could this person have done it? Did this person have the opportunity and the motive? And that's what these movies are all about, to kind of put these doubts in your head and these ideas. And a lot of people say, oh, I knew it was her from the get-go. Um, and maybe, it's very possible that a lot of people would figure out this one pretty early, but it is kind of a twisted story. Um, and then of course for me, who didn't read the novel, I had no idea who it could be, because they tend to set up so many characters who could have had the motive and the opportunity. So you never know. What I'm curious to find out is what did you guys think about that, the way the story was set up?
So there's really two elements to how the story is set up, right? There's one, the mystery, and then there's the two, the sort of the extra element on it of like Poirot thinking that it might be like an actual ghost. Not really. Let me rephrase. I don't know that he ever actually thinks that it's an actual ghost, but he is presented with some stuff that makes him question sort of his more, I would say, agnostic views on the supernatural, right? And I think those are the two layers of this. I like both of those because this is a character who is both, as we approach Poirot in this, he is sort of at a lull in his career. He's sort of like retired, and he's not really like taking on anything that's really challenging him. And so finding something that not only challenges him as a mystery, but also maybe challenges his preconceived notions of how these mysteries unfold, that was cool. And then the mystery itself, I enjoyed all parts of it. I will say there was one thing I did not enjoy, and I'll just throw this out right here while we're talking about the mystery parts of it. There was, and this is silly, but there is a sound effect that this movie put in at one point, which drew attention to something that...
Singing?
No, there is a spot where they're talking on the roof about the flowers, and Rowena walks by and she kicks something out of the way, and it goes click, clang, clang, like, and it's very loudly Foleyed. And I'm like, well, she obviously just like hid some sort of evidence right there, because it was a very loud. And so later on, you come back and see that, like in the final reveal, that's where she hid the little wrong rake thing. I could have done without that, because it drew attention. When you draw attention to something like that, you can't help but think like, this is going to be important, right? But that's a small thing. That's a small thing. And again, like the level and the meta level on top of it, I think all worked by and large very well. How about you though, Brad?
Chekhov's garden rake, right?
Yeah.
Real quick, a couple of comments in the live chat. Bobby Miller. Hey, Bobby. He says, welcome back, guys. Thanks so much.
Hey, Bobby.
Appreciate you. And Matthew says, the boys are back. Yes, indeed, we are. Matthew, so glad to see you. Welcome. Y'all kind of talked about the mystery already, but Will, you mentioned the word meta, and that keyed into something that I wanted to bring up that I kind of appreciated about this film. It was a little Inception-y, right? So this story is written by a mystery writer who writes about this detective solving these amazing mysteries. And in this mystery story that she's written is a writer who writes mystery stories about a detective who solves these incredible mysteries. And she's basically built her fame around these stories about him. And I just felt that was sort of like a really neat sort of mechanism, you know what I mean? Like a meta message, if you will, kind of on the format and how some of that works. So I really like the friendship and interplay between Poirot and Ariadne, such a cool name. It was kind of interesting to see how, aside from the murder mystery, how sort of this con was pulled on Poirot to get him involved in this thing. And it was interesting that Poirot chose not to take him to the police or whatever for pulling this con on him. I don't even know if they actually broke any laws, but I'd be pretty pissed if it were me. I'd have like a scorched earth policy. You're dead to me. Like, don't ever talk to me again. But they still kind of have this a little bit of like a playful parting, and I actually really appreciated that. It was neat to see Poirot have sort of a sidekick, on this one. You know, somebody that he trusted and he knew for a long time. And yeah, she was sort of tangentially part of things a little bit, but I really appreciate that interplay. And Tina Fey was just smarmy enough to pull that off, and I like the chemistry between her and Kenneth Branagh a lot.
You know, Brad, if they do make another one of these, one thing that may make you happy is, so this character, the Miss Oliver character, I can never really cleanly say Ariadne. Maybe I just did. I don't know. But Miss Oliver, she's like in 6 of the Poirot books. So she's a kind of a recurring character. So there is a world where one of those other ones that she's appeared in is adapted, and we get to see her again, and not only do like the sidekick role again, but also with the sort of the weight of, I don't know if I trust you fully because of this last thing that happened. That could be kind of layered in. So
yeah,
I would be all for that for one of the future ones.
That would definitely be an interesting complication for sure.
Yeah, I would have. There was one section of the movie where this, you know, he starts to hear voices, right? Maybe ghostly voices or children singing kind of voices, and then at one point he actually sees a small girl, right? Kind of around the corner. And I think that part is left sort of open unless I missed something, right? That girl was not real.
That girl was not real. He was,
which I kind of wish it was real, like, because, you know, he was the skeptic the whole time, right? And so I kind of wish that it had kind of more, you know, whether the girl was real or not, kind of fell more toward his way of thinking, like, oh, somebody has planted a girl in this house or whatever.
Well, there is a small part of so we find out, just to sort of reveal this, the reason that he's seeing ghosts and hearing voices is, you know, he's ingested this hallucinogenic honey, which is part of the murder plot, but also kind of part of what's causing him to think that maybe the ghosts are real. But there is a certain small element there where by the end of this, Poirot, I think, is pretty convinced of kind of like he's set in kind of what his beliefs are. But there's that moment where he sees the flash of what he thinks is the girl up on the balcony when the final thing happens, where I think some of the other characters are a little more like, maybe it wasn't. And I think that that's where the audience is supposed to be left to. Like, 99% sure this was probably part of the hallucination, but man, there's still that 1% chance. And I think that's, even in some ways, that can even be a little spookier than like if you did know for sure, right? You know, because you'll always, you know, you got to imagine that Poirot and some of these other characters will always, maybe if they don't admit it, they'll always wonder, right? And I think that's compelling.
Yeah. It's funny, we had in this movie, you mentioned it earlier, Brad, I think, like Chekhov's garden rake, and we had Chekhov's little honey pot. Also, there's a scene where it kind of focuses on the honey thing, like in next to the sink, and I'm like, wonder what that's all about. But I mean, even these little breadcrumbs that they leave really aren't enough to logically piece it together like Poirot does. And I think that's intentional, right? Because the movie wants us as an audience to know we're not at the level of Poirot, right? He's operating on a level up here with his deductive skills, and we're down here like trying to eat on the little breadcrumbs and figure things out. But he's already, you know, 6 steps ahead of everybody else. And I like that about these movies. You know, they show you the thing, you know it's a thing, but you don't know how that thing really ties in. You don't have all the pieces. So I thought that was really cool.
All right. Well, are there any final thoughts y'all want to get out? I think we've covered the end of this murdery, you know, Halloween mystery seance-y thing. I guess the only thing that we could really dive into that we haven't maybe put a cap on yet was, do you think that the Michelle Yeoh medium character really did have some psychic powers and was using the chicanery to like sell it more so, or do we think she was completely a fraud? Where did you guys ultimately come down?
It's hard to say. I think. Wow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I gotta admit though, she may have been selling, a facade, right, of hers, but she was totally believable in selling it. I mean, she could sell me that she was actually doing it, even even though we learned later that I guess she was not, right. A lot of it was fakery, but she was good at it, and it was only Perot who could figure her out.
I'm definitely in team she's a fraud. They kind of set up the kind of the what she knew and how she knew it. I'm also team Michelle Yeoh is an incredible actress, so much so that she sells the hell out of not just her performance, but the performance that her character has to give to be compelling in her chicanery, right? So I think that's part of the magic of this movie. Like, I think if you put someone in that role who wasn't as compelling at delivering exactly what she's able to deliver, I don't think it would be as much of a fun character for us to sort of spend time with. So that's where I land. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, it was interesting to me. One of her assistants was like, yeah, she's a complete and total fraud. And the other assistant was like, no, she really has an ability, but like, we do the fake things to help people believe because maybe it's not enough, with just her natural ability. And sometimes in real life, you may have some ability to sing or I don't know, do certain things, but you kind of hype other people up about you by throwing in some other elements. So I think for me, I feel like she did maybe have a little something. I think there was something going on in that house. I The little boy wasn't being drugged with the hallucinogenic honey, but he was hearing voices, and he felt like he was tapped into what was going on. So I think I choose to believe that Michelle Yeoh's character, the Madame, did have a little bit of ability, but maybe she was just kind of hyping things up for theater and drama.
Here's a question, and this is sort of the Rorschach test of this movie. Brad, in your real life, what do you are you the type of person who believes that there's the potential for like ghosts? Are you like believer? Are you a hard skeptic? Are you in between? Because I'm a hard skeptic, so like that's part of like I bring that to this movie, and so I project this onto this movie, right?
So completely get that. And I was growing up very skeptical too. And people probably think I'm crazy when I tell this story, but I promise this is 100% real. My experience lived. My grandpa had Alzheimer's, and he lived with us, and he would get up in the middle of the night and he would open all the drawers and cabinets. One of the things my mom did to try and keep his mind active was she would hide pennies around the house in all the different drawers and cabinets, and he would go looking for them, and that would like help him. Anyway, about a week after he passed away, I woke up because I heard noises in the kitchen, and I walked out into the kitchen, and all the drawers and cabinets were open. I'm getting chills talking about it, and I saw a drawer opening while I was standing there watching it, and there's nobody else in the room. It's not windy in the kitchen. And then I smelled my grandpa's cologne. Oh my God, I have goosebumps. So I feel like maybe there is a propensity for that. I know science doesn't explain it. Maybe I'm a little, I don't know, dumb or something, but
No.
I have a little bit of belief, I think.
I don't,
Well-
and I want to real quick, and I want to ask you
Go
that too, but I do want to just sort of, I want to dispel the like, maybe dumb part of that. Like I ask not because I think that I'm right or think someone else is. I think different people come into it with different experiences, and each of these experiences shape not just the way we see the world, but also the way we interpret some of our interpretations of media too. So I asked for that reason, not because like I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, whatever, right? So
yeah, I appreciate the clarity for sure. How about you, babe? Any thoughts?
Look, I am pretty much somewhere in between, but I'm more toward a hard skeptic. Although I do fully believe that spirits of people past in our lives do come back to us in our consciousness. Physical manifestations, I'm not so sure about, but I definitely believe they come back to us in our consciousness, whether it's our, feelings that we get, even when we're fully conscious, walking around, like we think we hear somebody or we think we see something. I think that totally has happened. I totally give that credence. For sure. We have one question we should sign off with. Matthew says, hey, why didn't the mom just kill the detective when he was bobbing for apples? I guess that would have broke the movie. And I think that's kind of explained in the movie. I think she thought that person bobbing for apples, because they had the mask on, if you remember. He had the mask on. He had tilted the mask up when he went down into the apples. But I think the mom thought that was the Mrs. Reynolds character, because she was the one who was originally wearing the mask. And she wanted to kill the Mrs. Reynolds character because I think she was afraid that she would see that she murdered her daughter, right? And she would be able to see that out. And that's why she misdirected off of the detective when she figured out it wasn't Mrs. Reynolds. And then she went immediately back up, found Mrs. Reynolds, and pushed her off the thing. Right.
And to that point, she also wanted this to happen right at midnight, which is part of it, because she really wanted to sell sort of the like supernatural element of it, because that was sort of her way of getting through this. So the timeline to me would look like she started to try to kill Mrs. Reynolds, realized that it wasn't, and then panicked and was like, oh shit, I've got to find her really quick, and sprinted off. So I think there's a world where if those elements weren't there, she might have been like, well, I guess I'll just kill him while I'm here because I've already started to ring the bell. I might as well finish it. But she was trying to build this narrative that was on a timetable.
Yep. Plus, there was an added component of Poirot's body man coming up behind him. Remember, he enters the room just a few moments right after she sort of flees the scene, and so maybe she heard his footsteps, and so she flew out of there. That could have been a component for that as well.
Right.
So, but Matthew, great question. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Well, fellas, it has been, as usual, a fantastic movie discussion. So great to chat with you all about our thoughts and feelings about these things. It's one of the joyful things about movies and media. We can have different opinions, and the fun in the journey is talking through kind of how we feel it and comparing those feelings. But I think we're at a natural point where we can make a transition over to our plugs for this episode. We would normally maybe end the show after our movie discussion, but plugs are so important. Butt plugs are so important.
Butt plugs can be very important.
They must have some dedicated time to them. So yes, we're going to do that. And we're going to start with Will. Will, what is your butt plug for this week?
Yeah, so with my travel recently, I ended up watching a bunch of just those like murder porn style documentaries on Netflix, and I don't, as much as I enjoy them, whether
now you're in my territory.
Yeah, I watched one about a hitchhiking hatchet wielder. I watched a mini series about David Koresh. I watched a bunch of things like that, but none of them are like really recommend worthy. So I'm going to recommend something a little off. It's something that's already been plugged on this show, but I feel like sometimes a good plug can get multiple uses. So I am about 100 hours played on Baldur's Gate 3 now. That's literally all I've done. I am pretty deep into Act 3 right now. I've got a bunch of I've been railed by like 4 or 5 different characters so far.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very
I gotta know. So Asterion?
So Asterion is my main bae, but I've recently also begun a polyamorous relationship with Housen, which is nice because you can have a relationship with both. And then the other two, one of them is spoiler territory, so I will not bring it up. And the other one is a small character that appears like in a brothel, which so nothing too surprising there.
Cool.
The hot guy at the brothel.
Yeah. So but so it's a very horny game. But also like, and Brad, I know you mentioned this before, but like, this is the closest to D&D I've ever experienced outside of playing D&D. This is a game, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since junior high, right? This is something that when I was a little dude, like this was what I did. This is what I hung out with my friends in high school, and this is how I met my clique in college. This is how I kept in touch with like my bear friends during COVID. D&D has always been my home base, and but it's also a very social game, and I'm the type of person that loves being able to socialize, but also gets overpeopled pretty easily. And Baldur's Gate has been a fantastic way for me to still be able to enjoy that thing that I enjoy doing with other people, but also when I'm not feeling like peopling, so it is one, it's one of the best games I've ever played. It is just that meticulously well-made a game. I'm just going to piggyback off of Brad's recommendation from, I think, 2 weeks ago when we last did our episode. Baldur's Gate is really good. Like it's, again, I'm, like I said, about 100 hours in. So how many movies could I have watched in that time? That's why my plugs are thin this week.
Well, I'm so jazzed that you're enjoying it as much as you are. And I know, for me too, it's been fantastic. I'm still, I'm at the end of Act 1. But I've put in like 55 hours at this point, just doing all the things and having all the conversations. But what's interesting is I've also recently started playing it with Kevin, who lives here, as well as my boy. And so I'm almost more excited about the campaigns with them because we're talking and we're strategizing. We're trying to figure things out. And Kevin, especially, who has never played, he played D&D a little bit for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's so funny to hear him, like when we're not playing, we'll be strategizing. He's like, well, your character has a +3 to his initiative and he has a +7 to his persuasion. And you could do this and this and this and this and this. I'm like, when did you become a D&D nerd? And he's like, this game sucked me in.
Yes.
It got me.
Is he now?
I don't know much about D&D, but I know that Kevin is he's like a crazy good like logistician. You know what I mean? Like he's great with numbers and and that kind of stuff about statistics and things like that. So yeah, I could totally see him figuring that shit out for you.
Well, fantasy is like not even his genre. He does not like fantasy movies. He didn't like the D&D movie really at all.
Really?
But like Baldur's Gate, man, he is so invested. And he actually gets a little perturbed at me when I make bad decisions. And I'm playing a bard in his campaign. And I like to sing out what I'm doing sometimes. Like, and he just looks at me and he's like, could you not sing about trying to unlock the door for once? That'd be great.
Is there a genre of, like, if he's not a fantasy nerd, does he have another thing that he's more like
Madden? And NBA 2K, whatever.
Okay. I was going to try to suggest a good tabletop role playing game. And there's Blood Bowl, like from like the Steve Jackson games from way back when. But there's not as many football ones. So I don't know.
But that's the power of Baldur's Gate. The storytelling is so fantastic. Jim, I would love to do a campaign with you. It's not a super actiony. I mean, there's action, but it's not like button mashing. It's very strategic. But I'd love to see the choices that you make, and it'll probably never happen, but it would be amazing. Well, it would be so cool.
What if the three of us did something?
Oh my God, I would kill for that. That would be amazing. Yeah. That would be super fun. I'm flashing back to our WoW experience that one time. We wouldn't have to broadcast it necessarily, but it could be a fun.
I'm sure there are already 26 Baldur's Gate podcasts.
Oh, there's so many. And Brad, I'll send you the link, but all the voice actors are getting together this Friday to do a Twitch stream.
Nice.
Like actual, like they're not playing Baldur's Gate, they're playing D&D, but as their characters. So,
neat.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. Did you see the shorts, the animated shorts that Larian has been putting out?
No. No. Oh my God,
Lindis!
Yes.
Oh
okay, so this is
they're so funny. They're wonderful.
Sorry, everyone. This is now the Baldur's Gate Bears podcast.
The Baldur's Gate appendix to the podcast.
The Bearder Gate podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to check them out, Will. You're going to be
I
rolling on the floor. They're amazing.
love them.
Anyway,
That's awesome.
wonderful pick, Will. Thank you so much for that. Jim, thank you for being patient while we nerded out. What's your butt plug for this week?
Sorry, I got to bring it back to movies. But and documentaries, Will. I'm glad you at least mentioned documentaries in your plug. When we were on vacation, I downloaded a bunch of digital content to my portable device, my iPad, and watched a bunch of stuff. A lot of which I could probably plug, but I'm going to go back to this documentary that I watched. It's called The Last Rider. And it's a documentary about the incredible story of a guy named Greg LeMond. I don't know if the name will ring a bell to many people, but he was the champion of the 1989 Tour de France. Back to France, back to, Hercule Poirot. Or was he Belgian? I don't know. I guess he was French. I'm not sure. But yeah, when I was growing up, and I was probably I was 30 when this happened. So I remember following. I wasn't a huge cyclist or a cycling fan, but I was more into it for the human story. And this is a really good one, Greg LeMond. This was before the age of doping in cycling, really happened with what's his name, Lance Armstrong, right? This is before that whole thing blew up. Greg LeMond was a great champion. The first U.S., I think he was the first American to win the Tour de France in 1989, and he overcame some incredible stuff in his life. It's in the IMDb description, but I don't want to spoil it because there are some major things that happened to him in his life before he won the Tour de France, and for him to come back was incredible. And it's a very well put together documentary too. It's called The Last Rider, and it's available for rent, on Apple TV or Amazon Prime right now. The Last Rider.
It's a hell of a recommend. I think of a Tour de France, and I think of I had a couple of summers where I was visiting some friends who are really big into cycling, and we would it was a really hot summer, and so we were eating frozen grapes on this couch, which is one of my favorite snacks. Watching Tour de France. This wasn't 1989. This was 2011, 2012 or so. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in checking this out because already I'm kind of getting some of those nostalgic feels.
My only experience watching the Tour de France was I was over at a guy's house one time for some playtime, and he had it on TV, and he would not tear his eyes away from the race, and I'm like, why did you even invite me over if this is all you were gonna do?
Why did you invite me over?
It's a hookup record.
And he's like, honey, don't worry, I'm gonna make it worth your while. And I'm like, okay, and he did. So it was fine, But okay. I was just kind of
put on these bike shorts.
I'm like, why am I watching all these guys on bikes? All these people on bikes right now, this
all these skinny guys on bikes.
God. Not even any big beefy guys riding bikes for me. They're all skinny little, And there's nothing wrong with people with that body type. But I was just this was not, my idea of a well executed hookup. So, but I got to give props to those guys who can sit on those bicycle seats for, as long as they do. I certainly couldn't do it.
But I mean, this guy, Greg LeMond, he's still around. He is featured in the movie, obviously a lot older, not cycling probably anymore, but he basically popularized cycling in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
This took cycling by storm, where a lot of people probably never even heard of the Tour de France before. So many people were watching the tour play out because he was in the running right down to the end, and it was really great.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you got so much out of that, babe. That's fantastic. I know you like to ride your bike. Do you ever think you might condition a little bit and maybe do a tour to Tucson or something?
Never. No, I'm not into that endurance. I just do it for enjoyment. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
I just like the wind in my face and looking at the scenery and getting a little bit of exercise, and I'm happy. That's my happy place.
Well, there you go. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your butt plug.
And one more thing, Bobby, that was Cattail you saw on my camera. That was our youngest black cat, Jordy.
Yes. Yep. Speaking of
Father
Halloween
Jordy has
stuff.
blessed us. Yes.
Well, for me this week, I was trying to find some things to watch on the plane to and from Hawaii. And, it's hard because it's a 6-hour flight for us. And I can watch TV shows, but they're only like 42 minutes to like 58 minutes. And then it's like, well, now I have, this probably sounds weird, but now I have the anxiety of picking something else that I have to watch. So I'm like, well, why don't I just pick some movies this time? They're 2 to 2.5 hours long. I can get a couple movies in on the flight. I only have to make 2 decisions instead of like 8. So with the new Hunger Games movie coming out in the beginning of November, I decided I would take a trip in the Wayback Machine all the way back to 2012's The Hunger Games. And it was really cool to go back and watch that movie again. I'm not going to lie. We just saw Jennifer Lawrence in No Hard Feelings about a month or two ago. And kind of comparing her where she is now, and especially how she was in that movie, to her performance in The Hunger Games as Katniss. It was just really fucking cool to see how far Jennifer Lawrence has come since then. Not saying she did bad in Hunger Games. I think she was pretty fine, pretty decent in those films, but she's really come into her own. She has got some chops, and I love that she is still working these days, strike and everything aside. But it was kind of neat for me to revisit The Hunger Games. That's my plug if you haven't figured it out. With the new movie coming out, it's a prequel that takes place 50 years before the quadrilogy of films that came out in starting in 2012. The new movie, I think, focuses heavily on President Snow as a young man from the trailers. And so this time around, I really focused on the Donald Sutherland President Snow character, knowing that a lot of his history and stuff was going to be filmed or filled in. And now I finished it, and I'm like, I got to watch Catching Fire. I've got to watch, the other 2 movies after that. But I'm watching it through the lens of the Donald Sutherland character. And it's kind of like their new movies to me in a way. I didn't pay that much attention to his characters in that series of films, but I think he's a fantastic actor. I doubt he's going to be in the new movie, but I look forward to that one, kind of informing things. Normally, I'm not a prequel kind of guy, but I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to it.
And then after you're done, and this is not just for you, this is for listeners. If you're following Brad on this journey, you're going to watch the first Hunger Games, then you're going to watch Hunger Games Catching Fire. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go check out our Movie Bears podcast on Libsyn page. Check out MBP episode 52 from November of 2013 when we reviewed Hunger Games Catching Fire. We did the other ones after that too, but that was, I think, the first one was before our show began, so this the second one was the first one we reviewed.
Wow, 10 years.
That's so crazy. That's just nuts. Wow. All right. Well, it has it's definitely been a while that we've been doing the show. Coming up in December, that's going to be our 11-year anniversary, I think. Right? We started in 2012. So 2023, 11 years. This was episode 486. Maybe we'll get to 500, at some point. But go back and check out those old episodes. I'm sure they're very different to the very polished product we put out now, which is basically just us gabbing at a screen. It's not. Anyway, but listen, we are off next week. Jim's got some work travel. Will be fantastic festing. And in all honesty, we'll probably be playing Baldur's Gate 3 while I have lots and lots of time to myself. So, but we'll be back with you all the week after. So that's going to be October 3rd of 2023. We'll be back. Put it on your calendars if you like. We'll see you all then. Between now and then, though, if folks want to chat, Jim, where can people interact with you online?
You could find me on Letterboxd. You can see my movie ratings and occasional reviews on Letterboxd at JJP Out West. That's right here in the box for people watching, but it's at JJP Out West. And I'm still on that X app, I guess, as at JJP Out West, and also on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. Thank you so much. And Will, how about you? Where can folks interface?
Find me on Twitter and well, I guess don't find me on Twitter. I'm kind of fucking off of Twitter. I don't like X anymore. Find me on Blue Sky. Find me on Instagram. Find me on TikTok. The Movie Bear. Look for Letterboxd. Just search for William Lindis there. Search for me by name, William Lindis, on Facebook. Just find me on the socials. I'm there. I'm on whichever one you most use. I'm probably there.
All right. Thanks so much, Will. And folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has bears, chubs, chasers, dolphins, wolves, etc., etc., etc. Common with you. Please send a message first, though, so I know you are not a bot. And I guess you can find me on Twitter. I'm not going to call it by the new name. I'm still there as iBrad Pro, but you can also find me on Letterboxd if you're wanting to interface about movies. That is the place I suggest that you find me, and we can chat. We can have some discussions. But thanks as always, everyone, for tuning in. We love and appreciate y'all. We will see you in 2 weeks from tonight, relative to when we record again, October the 3rd. Have a good one, everybody. Take care. See you later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye bye.